back to Field Stories. I am your host this episode, Chris Catola, and yes, normally I would throw this to Michela or Nick or both, but I am alone this week, and you're probably wondering why. Well, I decided that for the quality of the show, we had to let the other two go. I'm sorry, but I think everyone listening, watching can understand, but no, I'm kidding. That's not what happened. Basically, the reality is it's just really hard to keep schedules for three people who are super busy during the peak of field season. And we made a decision internally as a team of co-hosts that some episodes are just going to be solo. So this is a solo episode with yours truly. Michela is occupied this weekend. She's super busy and wasn't able to be free for this interview. And Nick is still probably riding an anaconda in Suriname or up to his waist in mud. Yesterday, he was like covered in, I don't know what Nick's doing. He's just living his life in Suriname, so he's not able to join us, but completely understandable. So yeah, just going to be me this week. I am sitting here right now, staring out the window on actually a cloudy day here in Peru in the Amazon. Thank God there's some cloud because it's been so hot the last week. The cold snap we had in the past is gone. We're back to the Amazonian heat. But right now it's pretty good. I think it's about 28 Celsius. There's no sun. Actually very comfortable. So so myself, I'm about just past the halfway point of this research stint. I've got another 5 weeks left before we get a bit of a break from field work here. And things are rolling. Things are going well. A bit tired, but otherwise, standard fare in the world of field work in the Amazon. So this week's guest, moving on to the show today, is Jody Allair, and he is the Outreach Communications Director for Birds Canada, if I can say it properly. And Jody is someone that I've had the pleasure of working with briefly in the past, in my former life back in Ontario, back in Canada. And Jody's work is really impressive, and he's a really great speaker. Someone, when you listen to Jody speak, you just naturally get excited about birds, about conservation, about nature. He just has that ability to convey that really authentic, genuine passion for conservation and nature. And I'm really excited to speak to Jody today about his work, about his past, his career, and sort of where he sees outreach and conservation going and the changes that have occurred. So I think he's going to be a great guest today. And without further ado, let's go. All right, thanks for joining us, everyone. And our guest today is Jody Allair, and he is the Director of Community Engagement for Birds Canada. And actually, Jody and me had crossed paths really quickly at a BioBlitz, I remember. Seems like 100 years ago now, but it was maybe 8-9 years ago now. I don't remember how long, but a while ago. And I've sort of followed your work, Jody, on obviously social media, and have known about the great work you're doing for different capacities with Birds Canada and in general conservation and ornithology in Canada. So I really appreciate you taking the time out of your weekend to join me today. And Jody, if you could share with our viewers and listeners a little bit about your background and sort of what you're doing now, that would be awesome.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Chris. This is such a fun opportunity to reconnect. And I have to say, I'm a huge fan of the work you are doing down in Peru, and all over the world, to be honest. But I love your social media work in Peru. It definitely makes me want to drop everything and go down and help do stuff. So I've been, I think, really lucky. When I was a kid, I sort of knew I wanted to work in the biological field. I love nature. I wanted to be outside all the time. And very quickly it became birds for me, right? Birds was the real hook. I really wanted to study birds and to work on birds. And I think it really formed, into like a reality that I could make a career out of this when I started volunteering at Long Point Bird Observatory in Southern Ontario on the North Shore Lake here. It's the oldest bird observatory in the Western Hemisphere. Over 1 million birds banded. Like, it's just an incredible place with an unbelievable list of talent and people that have come through that field station. So I started there as a kid and got totally hooked, like completely hooked. I was doing like census before school, and I was just in the habit of just being, wanting to be a field biologist, and got done university, and I just jumped right into it, and started doing different field jobs, and tried to study all the birds I can. I seem to have spent a lot of time working on raptors. I don't think that was necessarily intentional, but raptors are pretty awesome.
They're pretty cool. Yeah.
They're pretty great, right?
Yeah.
And I've had the great opportunity to work on a whole bunch of really fantastic projects. Um, uh, Managing Long Point Bird Observatory and Thunder Cape Bird Observatory for a stint, and running the Southern Ontario Bald Eagle Monitoring Program, where I got to band and put satellite transmitters on eagles, which was super fun, bald eagles,
Wow.
and ran the Ontario Nocturnal Owl Survey, and quite a few years working on forest birds at risk. So coordinating the Ontario Forest Birds at Risk program, and doing lots of nest searching and color banding, and keeping tabs on some of the rarest birds that we have in Southern Ontario. And I love doing all that stuff, but I think eventually that morphed into me wanting to do more education and outreach. I think the value of communicating that work, and why these species are in trouble and what we need to do to help them, that started slowly started creeping up, and is now really the focus of my work at Birds Canada, where most of my job is within communications, and taking that next step, taking that science communication step, which I think is super important.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know how much. Well, I mean, we met at the BioBlitz, and don't know if I've ever sort of explained my background, which is a whole other episode and strange enough. But anyways, a lot of it did involve outreach in schools myself, and public events. So I share that passion for the importance of it. And yeah, I actually would like to talk about that as well. But before I get to that question, I guess my first question is, yeah, I don't think I needed explaining to me, but I'm curious. Just for the listeners and viewers, you said you grew up really liking nature and being out in nature. What is it about birds you think that hooks you? I know that's such a big question, a loaded question, but what do you think it was about birds that really kind of hooked you at such a young age?
Yeah, it is there is something funny about birds, right? And you meet lots of biologists, and birds are often, one of the focal species, and it certainly is for a lot of people. But I think there's a good reason for that, right? And I've always been, and I have to confess, I've always been lumped as a birder, but when I was growing up, I wanted to be a naturalist, right? And I still consider myself a naturalist. No one refers to me as a naturalist ever, but I feel like I like all natural history. I think it's all wonderful. I love Lepidoptera. I love orthopterans. I really like. There's a lot of aspects of natural history that I'm interested in, not necessarily an expert in, but birds. There's something kind of magic about birds, right? There's something about, and I know they can fly, and they look beautiful, and they can do these things that we can't do. Um, but there is something special when you spend time with birds, and whether it's just listening to that dawn chorus,
Yeah.
or whether it's watching amazing flight displays, whether it's hear violet green swallows in the Badlands, or bald eagles doing their incredible talon locking territorial thing. Birds can wow you, any day, any location. There's something they could do, something really, really cool, and there's something really special about that. I think there's something that really, um, transforms your view of the natural world. Birds are one of those great gateway subjects to connect people to nature, right? And of course, nature is filled with all sorts of wild and mysterious things, and I hope people don't stop at birds, and explore all the other things, right? But birds are just the best. To really slap you in the face. It's okay, time to start paying attention to nature, and the fact that they have that ability, I think, is special, and we need to foster that, right?
Mhm.
We need to foster that, because it can lead to not only interest in other nature, but I feel like if you start getting into birds, identifying birds, realizing that they're around you, you can actually have this transformative experience where you can change people's perception of their place in nature, and not love David Attenborough. Watching a David Attenborough documentary doesn't necessarily do that. But if you're outside, and you get really close views of a American kestrel or something that you've never seen before, it could do that, right? It could start changing the way you look at the world, and I think that's really special.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. It's always cool to hear different perspectives on that. I mean, for me, I think one thing that I think people who spend time around birds really appreciate too is just they're just really fun to look at. They're fun to watch, and it's not just like just the colors, but little movements,
Yeah,
the way their heads move, their
yeah.
interactions. I mean, there's few things more enjoyable than watching a bird rouse or preen or just move around and interact.
Hmm.
It's really great, and yeah, and the fact that they fly, it's a good point. I mean, that does it's an obvious point, but it does impact their lives so much and create so much specialization and different adaptations that you can just really dive into and go down that rabbit hole as well. So there's so much to unpack with them, and they're accessible. You can find them almost everywhere, right? So yeah,
No,
no, that's really
that's right.
yeah, for sure. Um, yeah, so you mentioned about outreach and education, and yeah, I was curious. Obviously for myself, like I said, I started doing outreach when I was pretty young. I was like 20. I started doing it, did it for about 15
Mm.
years regularly. So I can say, from my perspective, I had observations that I saw sort of changes in people's sort of outlooks, and I'm curious, I guess, for you, for your perspective as well, because you've done it like it's longer than me, and it's continued to do it in Canada and Ontario, well, not just Ontario, but Canada. Um, yeah, I wonder how you feel it's changed outreach, the mindset of the public. What have you seen in I guess, evolution of the public's perception of conservation and our role within it? I know, big question, but yeah,
It's a huge question. It's a
yeah,
huge question. Um, you know, it's a tough metric, right, to evaluate what kind of impact you have doing outreach. And sometimes the impact is small but really important. Like someone who comes to the bird observatory, it has a banding demo, when they're a kid or something like that, and they retain that memory, and then maybe years later they find themselves, showing their kids birds, right? Like, and that experience has happened. Um, I think I think it's really important to spread the word about, you know, not just the the critical juncture we're at with
mhm,
all the changes happening to the world with climate change and habitat lost and ramping up industrialization across the globe. Like there's some real hefty issues that are happening right now, and I think that's important messaging. But so too is the basic, spreading the joy and wonder of birds and snakes and other creatures that live in our world, that these are amazing things that live in our planet. You know and I think that's an important first step, right? And i
mhm,
think i think all types of communication are really important, certainly for younger audiences. When all the work I did with school kids, I really focused on that latter part, like the joy, the wonder, the
yes,
beauty,
mhm,
and like they're just cool, right? Like birds are so cool. Like, and we did a we were doing all this work with a local grade 6 class down there in Long Point, and I wanted to get them down to the field station to do saw-whet banding.
yeah,
This was over
yeah,
a decade ago, and I
yeah,
finally got the entire class, and it was like the class, and it took forever to organize this, and you have to have a good night, right? Got the whole
yeah,
class, like their parents, their pets, grandparents, uncle. There's like 60 people down
yeah,
there, right? And I'm like, oh, I hope to God we actually catch one. Um, and we did, and I still have a photo of this, of like, pulling the owl out of the bag, and they go around at night, see how we catch them. We pull, and in the banding lab, and like the looks on the faces of like the kids, but also the parents, because you
yeah,
could see from the get-go the parents were like, oh God, this is my Friday night, and this
yeah,
is
yeah,
all right, I guess we got to take the kids down. And the parents were like, wait, whoa, well, hold on, this is like an actual owl. I'm like, what did you expect? Like, what did you think was going to happen? We were just going to like watch a TV show about owls. And the parents were like freaking out as much as the kids, right? And I'm like, it was like a gotcha moment. It's like, this is the power of birds. But so I think things like that are really important. But it's hard to measure
yeah,
where it's going to lead, right? But I think now more than ever, we need messaging from all different aspects of ornithology and in the field of biology. Like we need people showing the wow. We need people showing the threats, and we need people to tell others what we need to do, what society should be doing to help, our imperiled living things. Because we're, like I said, we're at a really tough juncture right now, and I know you know it and live it. But I think a lot of people don't realize how fragile
no,
many of the world's ecosystems are.
yeah,
And like I said, you don't lead with that. but you want to get people there. You want to get people there in communication. And, again, birds are a great way, to do that, and, I don't know. So I've done a lot. I've done a lot of these, as have you, presenting to schools, and also bigger public, like on television, on radio, talking about this kind of conservation messaging. And my hope is that it will have an impact on some folks. And I think the more of us that are doing it, the better off I think we'll be. But it's a tough one to know, right? To know for sure whether you're making a difference or not. I'd like to think that I am. And I think, it's sort of time will tell.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like my perception, having done it, is that change is occurring, and I'd like to think all of us are having a role in that. The mindset is more everybody accepting there is something wrong that we need to help. And you're right that people, it's the classic phrase, but people are only going to protect what they love and understand. And I agree. Generating that's really important. And I feel, this is just my own personal opinion, but I feel like what we're doing now, a lot of us now, is it's almost the equivalent of being a paramedic for a trauma victim. We're trying to just keep the planet alive now to keep, but in the long run, that real change is going to occur because people embrace nature and our role in it. So it's twofold. You have to save what you can save today, but you have to inspire change. And that change is only going to occur if people really love it and understand it and want to protect it. So both things, as you said really well, are super important. So really well said. Thank you for that.
I think there's hope, Chris, in that there's so many younger people. Like when I started, and I imagine it was like it when you started too, there weren't as many like younger people really into birding. Yeah. And I grew up and I was a kid birder, and, and growing up in Peterborough, and I had lots of great mentors growing up. And, but they were all so much older than I was, right? I knew every birder my age in the whole country. There was like 4 of us. Like it was tough. And it's so not like that anymore. There's so many, and I think the pandemic has contributed to that. But there are lots more younger people now that want to get involved and want to do this. And that to me is, I'm super motivated now that there's new audience, there's younger people that get it, that understand these conservation messages.
Absolutely. I mean, I as much as we both and all of us in this world see bad things and know these things are happening, I also see lots of hope for the future as well. And I often say to people, nature is just really resilient. There's so many examples of nature. Just looking at us, even as a species, talking is an example of how crazy nature is, that we exist, that we evolved the way we are. For all the sometimes bad things we do so much amazing things, and that's a testament to nature, and we should see that as inspiration to keep going. So there's so much hope. There's so much, even though some days it's hard to see it. It's funny, I forgot you grew up in Peterborough. I grew up in Havelock. I'm from Toronto, but I grew up in Havelock. So there you go, small world.
That's right. Yeah, I used to spend summers on Crow Lake, man. That's so hilarious. Shout out to that really cool part of the province. Man, my first cerulean I've ever seen was in Havelock.
Kawarth is really, that's right. Kawarth is reunion. There you go. I guess speaking of like sort of the how things have changed and the perspective of that, I'm also curious. We spend quite a bit of time in this show with guests talking a bit about, how I guess younger people, people in university or just getting out of university, how they might break into this field as well. Because like you said, there's a lot of people interested, but then the next step, of course, trying to make a life of it, a career of it, what to do is a huge challenge. I'm sure you've had this question a lot, so have I. But I guess from your perspective, like, how do you think it's changed / what would you advise someone who's young, who's passionate, obviously we can talk about going to university and all that, but then really, we know that's not the only thing you have to do. Unfortunately, it's hard to get into this world. What's your thoughts? What's your tips for people?
Yeah, I do have thoughts. I feel like there are more opportunities now than when I was starting out, for sure. And I feel also strongly that there's more than one way to make a meaningful contribution to conservation and to biology. And you don't have to go the way of academia, right? You don't have to have a PhD. Like if that's your thing and you love research, and absolutely go to town, right? Like so many, but I feel like there are different ways to get involved, right? Academia, research, That's one way. You can still get involved in research without having a master's or PhD as well. There are ways that you can, contribute on the side, whether that if you are like a citizen scientist, if you wanted to volunteer, like have a job, like whether you're a paramedic or you're a teacher, there are still ways on the side that you can participate in programs to help collect data, whether it's like the Christmas bird count or something like that. So there's ways to contribute on a community level on that way. But I think the big one is through science communication. I think one of the big openings, and I think the thing that, like, the fact that we're even doing this show, right? It's on YouTube and it's on, and also streamed as a podcast. Like this, the fact that we can even do this now and reach people is quite remarkable. And I think there's a lot of data out there. For the most part, we know a lot of the trends and what to do. And I think there's the need for research to answer some big questions, like in Canada, how to deal with grassland bird decline, how to deal with aerial insectivore decline. And some of them there's not a clear answer. Some there is, but others there's not. But I think the world of science communication is whether it's through social media, whether it's through writing, there are lots of opportunities to play a part, to play a role in all this. And Chris, I have to say the thing, and obviously I know this interview is supposed to be about me, but this is something I think you do really well, is that you are a researcher, you have that knowledge base, but you're also really great at showing the stuff to a broad audience, to a general audience, and like that Bushmaster, I think that video, which I'm not saying it's the best, like I haven't seen all your stuff, but like when I saw that video of you with that Bushmaster, I'm like, oh my God, like I can't believe he's just like sitting down beside one of these like which I've never seen a Bushmaster. I'd love to see one. And I was just like completely glued. But I bet there was a whole bunch of people that have only, heard of a Bushmaster, and whether it's from Romancing the Stone or whatever, right? Not that anyone here has ever heard. It's a movie. It's an old movie from the 80s. Yeah. With Michael Douglas. Yeah. And, just think of it as like these evil, terrifying thing that just kills researchers, at will, and the fact to show it, it's like actually just like a normal living thing doing its thing. It's not got any interest in people. I think that's great that you do that. I think there's lots of opportunities for people to get involved and help share stories, tell stories. So conservation isn't now just, go to academia and do your research and write papers. That's not the only way conservation is achieved. That's an important part. There are now other parts. There's ways for general public to get involved in the research through citizen science, and there's communication. There's a way to get involved through communication. So, there's more than one way to do it. And I think that's what I'd recommend to people. Know what your strengths, what you want to do, and find a way to contribute through that.
Cool. Yeah, I couldn't said it better myself. That's awesome. Very, very good advice for sure. Well, almost ready to ask you for your story, but before I do that, I'm gonna steal my co-host Nick's question he asks sometimes, which is often we ask someone such as yourself with experience, you've been to different parts of obviously Canada, but the whole world looking for birds, and he would often have something to the effect of, and I'm going to steal it and say, if you could see one bird go to one place, like at this point in your life, what would it be? I know. So I would hate this question, but I know he'd probably ask it, so I'm going to throw it at you on behalf of Nick.
Oh my God, that is so hard.
I know. Maybe a region, maybe an area then, something.
Yeah. Okay. Let's do that, shall we? Like, I have a, like, favorite bird is so tough. And it's mainly because like my whole world is birds, right? I have a family and, like it's more than just birds, right? But
I get it.
But like I think about birds all the time. I read about birds all the time. These bookshelves are this is bird books basically. And there's so many things I want to see. There's so many amazing birds. But here's the trick, right? Here's the secret, is that birds are often just the excuse to get to go and explore an amazing part of the world, right? And sometimes, and that's the kind of the neat thing about birds. It's like going birding is sometimes that excuse you need to get outside. And if it is, then brilliant, right? It doesn't matter what you see bird-wise. It's getting you out there, then perfect. I have a bucket list for sure of places I want to go and see, because there's whole parts of the world I haven't been. I haven't been to Africa at all, and so I'll take anywhere
Yeah.
in Africa. I
Yeah.
really would. And but you know, I think if I could pick a place right now, a part of me would love to see Antarctica or some of those sub-Antarctic islands like South
I
Georgia
think
Island. You
that,
know, I
yeah.
would love to see the most remote places in the world. You know, where there's skuas and different penguins and
Yeah.
oh man, you know, black-browed albatross and sooty albatross and like it goes on. I would love to see some of those places. And honestly, it's kind of dark too, because I'd love to see some of these places before they're gone,
Yeah. They're
and
changing,
before, you
yes.
know, and they change too much. But before that, I would have said, before several years ago, I would have probably said the Amazon, and I did get to go back
Oh,
in,
cool.
like right before the
Where did you go,
pandemic.
actually?
Yeah, southern Ecuador. It was well all around Ecuador. Yeah,
Wow.
it was a tour of southern
Beautiful.
Ecuador, staying at all the Hokotoko Foundation lodges, and
Nice.
it was a conservation tour. So we were
Cool.
supporting the Hokotoko Foundation, meeting the
Nice.
people doing the work. Saw the Hokotoko ant pitta, which was
Yeah.
oh
Famous.
my goodness, that's a bird. That's a
Yeah.
serious
Yeah.
bird. That's
Love
an
it.
ant pitta to rule them all. Like,
Yeah,
wow,
they're crazy. Yeah.
incredible.
Oh, that's
Yeah, so I got to go to the Ecuadorian Amazon, and I loved it so much. The Amazon,
yeah.
there was something really, you felt really small, you know,
Yeah.
and and it
Yeah.
feels like life is like overwhelming around you, and I loved it. I loved it so much. I'd go, yeah, I'll definitely go back one of these days. That was
Yeah,
really cool.
well, as
So
I said, anytime, let me know. You're welcome to join us sometime for sure down here. But
whew.
no, that's cool. For me, one of the obscure places I really want to go one day is actually the Falkland Islands. Striated caracara is one of those birds I
Oh
want to
yeah.
see. Really want to see it. I don't know why. I saw something about it when I was like 10 years old on a documentary, and I've been in love with this bird ever since. So one day I got to get. I'm not that far away, so I got to get down there one day and see it. But
Yeah,
yeah,
Falklands are really interesting.
it's just super
That's a
cool
cool
bird.
place.
Super cool bird. Yeah. So.
Yeah, Australia.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. I feel like we could keep chatting about random things and birds and other things, but it's time to transition to the name of the show, so to speak.
Okay.
So yeah, go ahead and hit me with your story, Jody.
All right. So I have a list, and I seem to find myself, and I think part of it just, I've been surrounded with such great people, and still am surrounded by such great people, like the colleagues I work with at Birds Canada, just some of the best people I've ever met in my life.
Yeah.
And so you just, we were like-minded people. You end up in this like hilarious adventures.
Yeah.
And it's funny when I get asked to talk about a story, and especially after studying bald eagles for quite a few years and banding so many eagles. People are always like, "Oh, so like, what's your like big horror story of like banding eagles, and like how bad have you been gotten by an eagle?" And the answer is like never.
Yeah.
Like I've never had a bald eagle draw blood once. I've had
Well,
like a downy woodpecker annihilate my hands, like, and bleeding more than I thought could ever be possible from your like knuckles.
yeah.
Like I've been hurt way more by a downy woodpecker than by
Yeah.
any raptor ever.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Um, you know, so I don't have the bald eagle story. But the story I will tell is when fall many years ago, when I was running Thunder Cape, which is on the North Shore of Lake Superior near Thunder Bay, one of the
Mhm.
most beautiful parts of
Wow.
the world. I don't
Yeah.
say Canada, but no, like the
No,
world.
it's
North Shore Lake Superior
mhm.
is,
Yeah.
if you haven't been, you got to go. It's amazing. So this was in the fall. It was October. It was owl banding season,
Mhm.
and we were just doing dinner. It was getting dark. We were just getting ready to get out there and start doing a whole evening of banding northern saw-whet owls. And so we were all sitting around the dinner table eating food, and we so it's a remote field station. It's about a half an hour boat ride to get to there, or you hike for like 4.5 hours, and it's not an easy hike to get out there. So it's pretty remote, this
Mhm.
particular station. So it's solar powered. We have a sauna, which is amazing,
Mhm.
and wood heat and all that kind of fun stuff. It's a really great field station, and but you're sort of there, right? So and so you got to look after the place, and we often have animals that come into the station Like porcupines love to chew on everything, like absolutely everything. But we also had, at this particular time, we had a skunk around, and the skunk was such, love them, but they're kind of a pain in the butt because they're looking for food all around the cabin all the time, right? And so this one skunk has had a habit of digging around the pipes that we had coming out of the kitchen, below the sink, and it would dig around there because it could smell like that there was food. And so we were eating dinner and we could smell skunk, and so it's like, oh God, that skunk is back. So Adam Ladio, I haven't seen that guy in like a million years in California. He went, okay, I'll go check on the skunk. And so he opened the door, and it took about a few seconds, but all we could hear was this like unbelievably loud primal scream, right? Like he was just like yelling at the top of his lungs, right? So we like jumped from the table, like we thought he'd been shot, and we go outside, and he's on the ground with his down vest on the ground, like pinning the vest to the ground. And I look under the vest, and there's just a skunk tail sticking out from under the vest. I'm like, Adam, did you just catch the skunk? Like, what are you doing? And then I was just saying it, but I could see he's ghostly white. Like his face is like, he's gonna hate it, me telling the story like this. He looked pretty pale. And I looked down under the vest, and the vest was like, there was something big writhing under the vest. There was God. Something else there. And I'm like, Adam, what did you do? And he's like, there's an owl. There's an owl on the skunk. And I'm like, what? And so I'm like, okay, we got this. And I'm like, what do you think it is? I think it's a great horned owl. And I'm like, okay. Whew, right? And so he's got the owl pinned under his jacket, and the owl has got his talons in the skunk, right?
My God.
So proud of him for this. And like no thoughts whatsoever that like the ramifications of the smell. But anyway, so he's there, and so I'm like, okay, this is amazing because I've never banded a great horned owl, and like this was, I was really pumped.
Yeah.
No cares at all about the smell. And so I'm like reaching under the vest, and I wish if only cell phones existed when we did this. This would have been the craziest video. So I found the talons of great horned owl. And for people who don't know, great horned owls are massive birds of prey, and they've got huge feet and huge talons, and they are really strong. And if they lock into you, you're in trouble, right? Like they are, and people realize how strong owls' feet are. I think, eagles and what, like, I'm more scared of a great horned owl than a bald eagle. I'm telling you right now, right? And for those who know, you know what I mean, right? And I'm reaching under the vest to find the legs, and I found the legs, and its talons are right in the skunk, right? So I got the legs, we got the vest off, I get the feet out of the skunk, and bingo, I got the great horned owl. So we walk into the banding lab, we band it, we're all excited. The smell is just unbelievably crazy. And we could not care at all. And there's pictures of us, we're like smiling ear to ear, right? And there was a moment where we're all sort of crowded into the really tiny banding lab. And, so I've got a really good hold of it, right? I've got the feet, we had it on the table and on its back, and, putting the band on. I'm holding onto the bird like this. And there was one moment when the owl sort of looked up, and he did this with his wings. He sort of shot out his shoulders like he was going to open his wings. And I thought he was going to get out. Like, I had a really good grip of this bird, right? And it just did this like, like at that moment, we're like, we are all going to die. Like, this bird is going to get out, and we are in big trouble. And I think it was just showing us, like, you're not in charge, I'm still in charge, right?
Yeah.
And so we banded it successfully. We took it out, we let it go, and it was a pretty magical thing. But then we're like, oh damn, I feel actually really bad that we completely ruined this great horned owl's meal. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to get any skunkier. Great opportunity to go pick up a skunk. So I went and picked up the skunk. You might as well, it's going to not smell any worse. And so I'm like, I wonder if the owl is actually going to come back for the skunk. So we actually I put the skunk out on the picnic table out in the front yard. In retrospect, I'm not sure that was the best idea. I don't know why I thought, let's put it on the table that we eat lunch at. So I put it out on the table, and just to see what would happen. And sure enough, an hour later, the owl came back,
Oh
grabbed
my
the
God,
skunk,
that's
and
shocking.
flew off. Yeah,
Wow,
isn't that incredible?
crazy.
We were like, there's no way it's going to come back for the skunk, and it
Yeah,
totally did. And I have to say, as like a researcher, like obviously glorifying the catching stuff, it's obviously we're doing all this to understand more about these birds,
of
and
course.
you know, it's obviously just not opportunity. And that made me feel good that we didn't keep it very long. You know, we try to
Yeah,
do these things very quick, but the fact that it came back to finish its meal was pretty cool. And quick fun fact, right? One of the things owls do, especially when they're eating skunks, the first thing they like to eat are the
yeah,
brains,
of
right? They
course.
love to go for the brains, right?
Yeah,
Um, and yes, so nothing I could do could scrub the smell off. Like Adam's vest was a write off.
yeah.
My shirt, my t-shirt that I was wearing, washed it a few times, did all the things, still couldn't get the smell out. Every photo from that season of all the cool birds we banded in the front yard, my shirt, that one shirt's hanging on a clothesline for the entire month in the background. And I eventually just burned it.
Yeah.
There you go. There's my one story, like just totally unexpected
Uh,
field station sort of shenanigans, which ended up having a great outcome because we got to ban the bird and the bird got its skunk meal back. So there you
yeah,
go.
that's crazy. I can't believe it came back. That's so cool. Wow. What time of the year was that? That would have been what, October or?
October. Yeah.
Yeah.
It had been hanging around. It actually, it killed a snow goose in the front
Uh,
yard a few mornings, but we knew there was one around,
yeah.
but it wasn't really hanging tight. Like we certainly didn't think we'd catch it. And our
Yeah.
nets, like the mesh isn't big enough for a great horn, right? We just like slingshot
Yeah.
out of it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, it actually killed a goose in the yard. And the only thing it did was like, it killed it by the neck and just like ate
Yeah.
its head and then flew off. And the rest of the goose was
Yeah.
totally fine.
That's
We may or may
wow.
not have eaten that goose for dinner. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you kind of might as well, right? Why not? I mean, it's a
Yeah.
waste of you don't waste the meat, honestly. I mean, yeah, it just makes
Snow goose
sense. Yeah.
dinner. Yeah.
Wow. That's crazy. Yeah, I love story. Well, that's exactly the idea of the show, right? Those stories are awesome. That's wow. And yeah, I completely. You're right when you say they are super powerful, and an owl footing you, I agree, is more likely than a bald eagle. So
Ooh,
it's
yeah.
those talons are long and thin. And have you been grabbed by a snowy owl before?
No, never. No, never hurt by a snowy owl. I've banded most owls. The only one I think that's got me in any kind of serious way was a long-eared owl. You know, and
Okay.
it's really interesting because long-eared and short-eared are really interesting kind of twin species in some
Yeah.
ways, right? They're very
Yeah.
similar, habitat a little bit different, but short-eared owls are the most docile, friendly,
Uh-huh.
lovely birds.
Yeah.
When I was catching and banding short ears, they just the loveliest things, not an
Yeah.
aggressive bone in their body. Whereas a long-eared owl will try to rip like Temple of Doom style your heart out
Wow.
of your chest,
Okay.
you know, and they
Interesting.
will bite you constantly. And so it's
Yeah.
really, you know, really, and all the power to it, right? I
Yeah.
kind of love it. I love that these
Me
birds
too.
are like, you
Yeah.
know what? Like you make
Give it
this
a try.
quick, I'm going to
Yeah.
hurt you. I'm
Yeah.
good
Yeah.
with it. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I just wondered because I've obviously worked with in captivity training and
Mm.
Eurasian eagles, great horned owls, snowy owls, and I have to say snowy owls are the of the three the most aggressive and the worst to work with. So I was curious. I haven't had a chance to work with any in the wild, so I didn't know what they'd be like. But
Yeah.
yeah,
No, I haven't
crazy.
done too many snowy owls at all for sure. And unfortunately, often when I'm grabbing them, it's usually ones that I find that are
Weak.
on the way out that are really
Yeah,
sick. That
yeah,
I've
yeah,
usually grabbed to pick up, and they're obviously not too
yeah,
dangerous. But
yeah.
that is a wonderful bird for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that was awesome, Jody. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. The story was great, and yeah, it was all around awesome episode. I think we'll definitely ask you on to come on again sometime in the future. I'm sure we have lots of things to chat about, and I think my co-host would love to chat with you about some, other things about birds, especially, Nick and Michela, different perspectives on birds. So yeah, I
Yeah,
really appreciate it, and yeah, I'll share so we'll share your social media links in the posts, and yeah, some people can follow some of the work you do. I know at Birds Canada through the outreach work you do, and yeah, keep up the good work, man. Really appreciate it, and hopefully I'll be back in Canada at some point. Maybe we'll get a chance to catch up in Canada at some point in person, or
Yeah.
you're always welcome to come down here to Peru as well anytime you want. So
Yeah, no, that sounds great, Chris. For sure, we should. And yeah, and thanks so much for having me. Really, really loving this show, and great to be a part of it.
awesome. Thanks, Jody. Take care.
Okay, bye.
All right, well, that was great. I hope everybody enjoyed it. I guess this outro is going to be pretty fast today because I don't have Michela or Nick to chat with. But I really enjoyed speaking to Jody. He was a super awesome guest. It was funny talking to him with the Kawartha connection. For those of you who don't know, I'm from Toronto, but I grew up about 2 hours northeast of the city. And the big city near where I grew up was Peterborough, Ontario. And Jody's from Peterborough, so it's kind of a old home episode for me in that way, and always interesting to sort of reminisce about good old Canada, the homeland. So yeah, that was super fun. And also, when Jody says that great hornbills are not fun to be grabbed by, yes, I can attest to this. I can concur with this. So his volunteer who grabbed the owl with the skunk is pretty courageous. But I would have done the same. You get a chance to band a great horned owl, you just got to dive on it. That's awesome. So super cool. Jody was awesome. And again, thanks so much to Jody for joining us. And yeah, I guess that's going to wrap it up. Next week, well, we'll see. We'll see where we are next week. We'll see who joins us next week. But we will hopefully see all of you, or have all of you listening to us next week. So thanks again, and take care.